Vote Graham.
Thank you very much, Mr Deputy Speaker. I stand in support of my honourable friend's motion in this House. Mr Speaker, the SI that's been put forward this evening, it sounds elementary, but it's important that the UK is explicit in its position to and its opposition to these instruments of torture. Its commitment is also central and exemplified by being one of the signatories of the Alliance for Torture-Free Trade, which obviously the UK has helped champion around the world. It also sends, Mr Deputy Speaker, an international signal. The United Kingdom has for a long time been a leader in human rights. My honourable friend for Tonbridge and the Molling has already raised just how strong the United Kingdom has been in the past. And I would just say it's not just the recent past. We can go back to this House in the 19th century, where it was one of the first houses of the advanced nations to abolish slavery. It is often overlooked the fact that, yes, the United Kingdom was involved in the slave trade, but it was also one of the first houses and the first parliaments to abolish it, and not just then reinforce it within British waters, but reinforce it in international waters around the globe. So all of those merchants that were faced in England, in Scotland, in Wales and Northern Ireland throughout what was then the Empire were then told, they were then led by this House of actually what the right actions were to take and what the moral cause was, and why actually trade shouldn't just be about profit, but it should be about overall prosperity and also moral righteousness at the same time. And I have to say, Mr Deputy Speaker, what is increasingly important about these kind of statutory instruments, and to make sure that we have such explicit elements in our legal system, both domestically and also internationally, is that element of transparency. In the past, before I came to this place, I worked in finance. I draw my members to my register of interests. But I was able to work abroad. I worked in several Asian countries, which are far less democratic than our own. There I regularly heard of individual cases where people were subjected to overt and covert and explicit and emotional torture, and no one was ever held to account. There wasn't that transparency in the judiciary to hold people account, and certainly there was no authority to hold the government to account, or indeed individual traders or merchants involved in supplying the materials that facilitated that kind of torture. And, Mr Speaker, when you see people who are actively outside taking part in a political demonstration, of which we see every day outside this place, when you're in a country where you actually see those individuals taken away, bundled into a van, and then never heard of again, that is where you start to understand the importance of this type of legislation and why the United Kingdom's place as a leader for human rights and taking its position against torture is so important. I also, Mr Deputy Speaker, want to mention the importance of maintaining standards. It's something that we probably are acutely aware of in this House just now. It's certainly something that we probably need to reflect on more and more. But it's also the importance of our country maintaining standards across the world. In the last 2 decades, and certainly as I was going through my education, I saw the United Kingdom soften its lines and sometimes let its standards slip, whether it was in the misadministration in Iraq, whether it was not adhering to red lines in Syria. And these mistakes cost so many lives, both at home and abroad, and these ghosts will haunt us for many years to come. And it's not the kind of mistakes that we can dare to repeat in this place or elsewhere. So we must continue to champion human rights, Mr Deputy Speaker. We must continue to reinforce the international order, and we must continue to set new standards so that when challenges arise to the international order, new challenges in whatever form they may be, this House can rise to meet those challenges and make sure that we lead people together in prosperity, in peace and in moral authority.
Yeah.